Raw feeding. For some, it's the holy grail of dog health. For others, it's just pseudoscience. But when a diet turns into an ideology, when science debates look more like religious wars, you have to ask the question, is raw dog food a cult? Today, we are peeling back the layers on one of the most heated, emotional, and frankly confusing debates in the pet world. This isn't just about food. This is about belief systems, identity, power, and money. And at the center of it all, your dog's ball. So buckle in, because we are going long today. By the end of this, you'll understand why raw sparks so much passion, what the science actually says, and why this debate matters more than most people realize. And more importantly, we aren't going to end with division, but with clarity. Before we start, my name is Sam, I'm your dog's nutritionist, and it's important for you to understand that I'm 100% independent. Listen, raw feeding isn't new. Dogs were eating raw long before kibble was ever invented. For thousands of years, dogs ate scraps, prey, leftovers, whatever us humans were eating. Meat, bones, organs, fat. That was their diet, and evolution shaped them to thrive on it. Then, in the late 800s and early 900s, something changed. Industrialization gave birth to the pet food industry. By the mid-20th century, kibble was the new king. It was cheap, it was convenient, easy to store, and heavily marketed as complete and balanced.
With all the vitamins, minerals, healthy fats and macronutrients that they need.
Okay. For decades, no one really questioned it. But by the 1980s and 90s, pet owners started noticing something. Their dogs were sicker. Rates of obesity, allergies, diabetes, and cancer were rising. And people began asking, could the food itself be part of the problem? Enter Dr. Ian Billinghurst, an Australian vet. In 1993, he published Give Your Dog a Bone, laying out what he called the BARF diet, biologically appropriate raw food. He argued that processed kibble was unnatural and that dogs needed fresh, raw meat, bones, and organs to thrive. And that book lit a fire. Slowly at first, then rapidly, with the rise of the internet, raw feeding spread. Forums, early blogs, Facebook groups, they all amplified the message. By the 2010s, Instagram and then TikTok made it visual. Perfectly staged raw bowls went viral, complete with sardines, eggs, spirulina sprinkles, and grass-fed lamb ribs. You know the drill. And let's be honest, it felt quite good. Kibble, let's face it, looks like brown industrial pellets, what they essentially are. It's anonymous, it's processed, it's quite distant. Raw, on the other hand, looks like food, smells like food, real food. It feels nurturing. It creates a very symbiotic relationship between you and your pet. And that emotional component is a huge part of why raw grew so fast. It wasn't just about what was in the bowl. It was about identity. It was about being part of something bigger. Think about it like this. Paleo for humans wasn't just about food. Keto isn't just about macros. CrossFit is not just about exercise. These things become movements, communities. Raw feeding tapped into that same cultural shift. And once a movement forms, it's very, very hard to ignore. Now, here's where the conflict begins, right? Because while raw feeding was gaining passionate supporters, the veterinary establishment was digging in. Veterinarians are taught that kibble is nutritionally complete, it's balanced, it's tested, it's safe. Why? Because the companies that make kibble also fund vet schools. Mars, Nestle Purina, Hales, they pay for research, they write the nutrition textbooks, and they sponsor vet education. So most vets come out of school with a strong bias. Kibble is science, raw is risky. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's how the system is built. Then there's liability. Imagine you're a vet and you recommend raw. A client mishandles chicken, their kid gets salmonella, and suddenly you're in legal hot water. The risk simply isn't worth it. And finally, there's the evidence gap. Raw research is growing, but it's still relatively small compared to kibble studies. That gives vets an easy line. There's no evidence raw is safe or effective. So what happens? Vets use strong language. They call raw dangerous or unscientific or a fad. And that language doesn't just dismiss raw, it dismisses the lived experiences of thousands of owners who have seen dramatic improvements in their dogs. And that's where the distrust begins. If your vet says raw is dangerous, but you've seen your itchy, lethargic dog transform into a vibrant, healthy animal on raw, who do you believe? Your eyes or the vets who seems unwilling to listen? This is how division grows. The more vets push back, the more raw feeders double down. And that doubling down is exactly what outsiders point to when they say raw feeding looks like a cult. But whether you are a seasoned raw feeder or you want to try it out for the first time, I simply couldn't recommend anything better than a DIY recipe book. It puts you in control of your dog's diet with nutritious recipes that you can source yourself. That means that you will have that intimate relationship with your pet because you will be preparing their food. So the DIY recipe book is an unmissable resource for people who want to make their own dog food. The link is down below. Now, let's look at kibble's flaws, right? And these are pretty obvious in my opinion. The first one is ultra processed. It's extruded at high heat, destroys enzymes, and denatures proteins. That heat then creates something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products, and acrylamide, both linked to inflammation and disease. And then we have the fact that carbohydrates make between 40 and 60% of most kibble, and dogs have no biological requirement for carbohydrates. Protein sources also are often low quality. We have meat meals, we have byproducts, we have plant proteins. This is all over the place, and shelf life can be 2 years, which means nutrients are stabilized with preservatives and synthetic vitamins. But let's look at raw as well, because DIY diets can be unbalanced if owners don't know what they're doing. That's why you should download a DIY recipe book. And then we have the risk of pathogens, Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria. But let me ask you a question. If you eat fresh food at your house, if you handle raw meat there, why is it going to be any different with your dog? But here's the hypocrisy. Kibble sometimes gets recalled for salmonella. Thousands of dogs have had problems from kibble recalls. Yet, when kibble is contaminated, it's treated as an unfortunate mistake. When raw tests positive, it's a national scandal. And that's not balanced, that's a double standard. And here's the bigger point. Nobody argues that humans should live on processed junk food instead of fresh food. We all accept that fresh, whole foods are healthier. So why do we suspend that logic when it comes to dogs? Fresh food is superior to ultra-processed food. Always. And that's not cultish. That's nutrition 101. Now let's talk about tribalism. Let's talk about the psychology. Why do people say raw feeding looks like a cult? Because people don't just do raw. They become raw feeders. They become evangelists. It's an identity. And with identity comes tribalism. You see it online all the time. If you're not feeding raw, you don't really love your dog. Vets are brainwashed by big kibble. Only raw feeders know the truth. And all these things. This is a classic of us versus them thinking. It mirrors other lifestyle cults. CrossFit, veganism, carnivore diets, essential oils, you name it. The community provides belonging. It gives people a sense of superiority, of knowing something others don't. Now, tribalism isn't always bad. Humans are wired for it. We crave community. We want to belong. But it becomes toxic when it shuts down dialogue, when it stops people from hearing criticism, or when it turns feeding your dog into a moral competition. That's when it starts to look like a cult. Not because raw itself is cultish, but because human behavior makes it so. But let's not forget for 1 second the other side of the equation, the pet food industry. Big Kibble has a vested interest in portraying raw as as extreme, unsafe, even cult-like. Why? Because fresh food is disruptive. If millions of pet parents switch to raw or gently cooked diets, the billion-dollar kibble market takes a hit. They take a hit. So what do? They fund studies designed to highlight the risks of raw, amplify scare stories in the mainstream media, and they control the narrative in vet schools and continuing education. It's simply marketing. Plain and simple, and it works wonders. So when raw feeders push back, when they say the system is rigged, they aren't entirely wrong. But here's the twist: the more defensive raw feeders get, the more cult-like they look, which makes it even easier for big kibble to dismiss them. It's a vicious cycle. So where does that leave us? Not all kibble is poison, and not all raw is perfect. There are good kibbles, higher protein, low carb, gently baked, and there are terrible raw diets, unbalanced, careless, poorly handled, poorly produced, low quality food, awful. The answer isn't to pick a tribe. The answer is to do better. That might mean raw for some, cooked for others, hybrid diets for many. Add fresh toppers, rotate proteins, focus on nutrient density. Because nutrition here shouldn't be about ideology. It should be about outcomes. How's your dog's energy? Their digestion, their coat, their longevity? That's the metric that matters. Not whether you can claim membership to the Raw Club or the science-backed kibble camp. So, is raw dog food a cult? In some corners, maybe it does look like that. Some raw feeders can be tribal, even elitist, but that's not unique to raw. All the tribes do it. Keto dieters do it. CrossFitters do it. People who drink oat milk do it. Humans love tribes. But raw feeding at its core isn't about cults. It's about fresh food, and fresh food being better than ultra-processed food isn't controversial. It's indisputable. So maybe, instead of asking if raw is a cult, we should ask, why is it considered cultish to want the best for our dogs? Raw feeding doesn't have to be radical and doesn't have to be biblical. It doesn't have to be tribal. It can simply be common sense. One option among many, all aiming at the same goal, keeping our dogs healthy, happy, and with us for as long as possible. And if we can move past tribalism, if we can see each other not as enemies, but as fellow dog owners trying to do our best, then maybe the cult accusations will fade away. Because in the end, it's not about cults, it's about care. It's about feeding better, and that's something we should all be able to agree on. And if you want to cut through the noise and start feeding smarter, raw, cooked or otherwise, our DIY recipe book is absolutely amazing. It gives you clear, evidence-based steps and phenomenal recipes that put you in control of your dog's diet. You'll find it in the link down below. But if you're still quite curious about this topic of raw versus kibble, I put together a video about it and you can find it here.